Yes, so we're now streaming live on YouTube. And it's 7 o'clock. So if you'd like to commence, Chair.
Okay, thanks a lot. Good evening, everyone. Welcome to the Children and Education Scrutiny Committee. My name is Councillor David Over, and I will be chairing this evening's meeting. I would like to start by welcoming those members of the public and press who are watching the live stream of this meeting through the Council's YouTube page. Due to government guidance on social distancing, this meeting is taking place remotely in accordance with current legislation, which makes provision for remote attendance at and remote access to council meetings. The meeting is also following Peterborough City Council's virtual meeting protocol. In order for this meeting to run smoothly, I ask that members and participants keep your video camera switched on with your microphone muted, except when you are invited to speak. If you wish to speak, then please raise the virtual hand, which according to my notes is blue, but we've been through this half an hour ago about different types of hands. And the hand is located at the bottom of the participants section. Please be patient if you're not invited to speak as soon as you have raised your hand, as there may be other people wishing to speak before you. The Democratic Services team will be monitoring the participants list to see if anyone has dropped out of the meeting, and will try and contact you to provide assistance to rejoin the meeting if this should happen. If we run into technical difficulties, I ask for your patience. Should this occur, an adjournment of the meeting will be declared while the fault is addressed, and the public broadcast will be paused. If it's not possible, the meeting will be adjourned until such time as it can be reconvened. Finally, I would remind members that all virtual meetings are recorded. Before we move to the first item on the agenda, I will begin by taking a roll call of all Scrutiny Committee members to establish your presence. When your name is called out, please unmute the microphone and confirm that you are in attendance. Thank you. Paulina?
Chair. Councillor Aiken.
Present.
Councillor Casey.
Present.
Councillor Coles.
Present, thank you, Paulina.
Councillor Day.
Present, thank you.
Councillor Dowson.
Present.
Councillor Haynes.
Present.
Councillor Lane.
Present.
Councillor Over.
Present.
Councillor Robinson.
Present.
Councillor Rush.
Present.
Councillor Skibstead.
Present.
The following statutory education cooperative members are also in attendance: Flavio Vitesse.
Present.
Peter Cantley.
Present.
Claire Watchhorn.
Present.
And the following independent cooperative members are also in attendance: Al Kingsley.
Present.
Parish Councillor Susie Lucas.
Present.
Parish Councillor Dr. Sridhar.
Present.
Also in attendance is Wendy Ogle-Wellborn, Executive Director, People and Communities, who will support the committee as lead officer, and Councillor Lynn Ayres, thank you, Councillor Lynn Ayres, Cabinet Member for Children's Services and Education, Skills and University, who is in attendance with officers presenting their reports.
Thank you. And now I'd like to start the meeting, but first you may all be aware that Councillor Janet Goodwin, who is chair of this committee, sadly passed away on the 23rd of December. We are all deeply saddened by her loss, and she will be greatly missing as a councillor, and in particular on this committee, of which she had been a member for a number of years. Before moving to agenda item 1, I would therefore like to hold a minute's silence as a mark of respect and in memory of Councillor Janet Goodwin, chair of the committee. Thank you. And again, before we continue, I'd like to welcome Councillor Aitken to this committee, and it's good to have you on board, Kim. Thanks for coming along.
Thank you, Chair.
Okay. Right, we move on now. Item 1, apologies for absence. Paulina, are there any apologies?
Thank you, Chair. We just have recently received apologies from Rizwan Rahmatullah.
Yes, okay, thank you. Agenda item 2. Do any members of the committee have any declarations of interest or whipping declarations? No, I do. I'm going to declare that I'm a member of the combined authority.
We have Al Kingsley has raised his hand, Chair.
Okay, Al.
Thank you, Chair. I just wanted to confirm, yes, I'm also a member of the Combined Authority Business Board and have been linked with the project for the University of Peterborough.
Okay, thank you. And Councillor Coles?
Thank you, Chair. Similarly, I sit as lead member for skills on the Oversight and Scrutiny Committee for the Combined Authority, particular interest in the education side in the university.
Okay, thank you. Item 3, minutes of the Children and Education Scrutiny Committee meeting held on the 9th of November 2020, pages 3 to 12 of the agenda. We are being asked to approve the minutes as set out in the agenda as a correct record. Can I ask if any member who does not agree that the minutes are a true record of the meeting, click the raised hand function on your screen now. I see no objections, so we will take it that the minutes are agreed. We'll now move on to agenda item 4, call-in of any cabinet member or key officer's decisions. I have nothing, Paulina.
No, nothing for this meeting, Chairman.
Okay, thank you. We now move on to agenda item 5, New University of Peterborough update report, pages 13 to 24 of the agenda. I would like to welcome John Hill, Chief Officer of Business Board and Director of Business and Skills at the Cambridgeshire and Peterborough Combined Authority, who will present this report. Also in attendance is Councillor John Holditch, Leader of the Council and Deputy Mayor of the Cambridgeshire and Peterborough Combined Authority, and Councillor Lynn Ayres, Cabinet Member for Children's Services and Education Skills and University. When the officer has finished introducing the report, I'll ask the committee members if they have any questions and remind them that they will need to use the raised hand function to indicate if they wish to speak. Thank you. And we will go straight to the report now. Who's going to introduce that for us?
I'm introducing the report, Chair.
Thanks,
Thank you
John.
very much.
Thank you. And welcome.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you indeed. The report's intended to brief members on the establishment of Phase 1, a teaching building, and Phase 2, a research building, and also give an outline of the funding and other planning strategies for the further phases of the university. The key points include the rationale for the campus that will balance increased opportunity for local people to gain HE qualifications with the opportunity for them to gain a HE level job locally. It also covers the processes to secure further government funding, along with private sector funding for the remaining phases, and also the delivery approach. The report covers the CPCA strategy that gives rise to the ambition and the project for the university from the CPCA's perspective, and in particular to remove the higher education cold spot that exists in the Peterborough and Fenland area, but not just that. Filling the higher level skills gap in Peterborough would have limited effect without measures to significantly grow the business and industrial demand for those higher level skills. And that requires two sides of the skills and economic coin to be developed at the same time, and that's why we're presenting a balanced campus that has got academic teaching, and it's also got research and innovation business support to stimulate technology-based jobs. The academic buildings alone will generate 10,000 qualified learners at levels 5 and 6 over the 5 years from 2022, 294 university staff and nearly 600 jobs in the supply chain. The initial teaching building that is going up right now will provide for 2,000 students starting in September 2022, rising to 3,000 students by 24-25 academic year. It will be 31, or it has the budget for 31.3 million pounds, which includes 6.5 million from ARU and indeed 1.87 million from PCC in the form of the land they contributed that the university sits on. The university will have 4 faculties: innovation, business and entrepreneurship, creative and digital arts and sciences, agriculture, environment and sustainability, and health, education and social care. The second phase, which is a research building, will focus on the development of net zero carbon technologies and has an anchor tenant in the form of Photocentric that will be developing 3D battery technologies for passenger vehicles. That's got a budget of 16.77 million, of which Photocentric are contributing 3 million. The further phases will be the subject to bids during the course of this year and over the next couple of years to 2 main funding sources: the Levelling Up Fund that you may have been aware of from the spending review, which is 4 billion, with 600 million being available in 2021, and also the Shared Prosperity Fund, which is 1.5 billion a year, with 220 million being available in 2021. And we specifically are intending to make bids to the Levelling Up Fund in the spring for the second teaching building and the second research building. Later, the third teaching building will be bid for, but we don't expect to do that until 23-24. Because there's the need for students at that level, which will be about 6,500 students, won't be there until 2027. Thank you very much.
Thank you. I'll open up now to questions. Any hands? Can I see any hands? Oh, hundreds of them. Right. I'll start at the top of my screen and work across. So, Councillor Coles.
Chair, thank you very much. And John, thanks very much for your comprehensive report. As you know, I'm quite familiar with what's going on. The bit that's new for me is that sports element in phase 5. And I was just wondering, I appreciate it's some way off now and you're not predicting it to even start just now, but is it dependent that you get all the sports facilities in the area to really assist in that bid? I was thinking, for example, if Posh were to relocate there, that shows the artist's drawing on page 52 sort of indicates that might be the case. But I just wondered what your thinking was in terms of what sort of offer we could provide with the phase 5.
Thank you, Councillor Coles. Nice to see you again. Yes, ARU predict but ARU are already by volume the most successful sports science provider in the UK. Loughborough is much more famous and to be fair, are much higher level of excellence. But in terms of volume, ARU are right up there. They see Peterborough as a really interesting geographic catchment area for sports science. And indeed, I did talk to Randy and to Jason Neal from Posh and their backers yesterday. And they are keen, should they ever relocate to the embankment. They are very keen to integrate with the sports science faculty there and run all sorts of things, including sports academies for local young people and the like.
Thank you. I appreciate it's very early days yet, but it's good to hear that those sort of things are being thought about now and they're trying to be integrated in the plans. Thank you.
Yeah. Okay, thank you. Councillor Robinson.
Thank you. And thank you, Mr. Hill, for the report. It was very detailed. My question's really around climate action duties. So I feel that is something that falls on the shoulders of all portfolios. And I had been thinking that the choice of location in the city centre was because it takes people on the bus and from the train station and on foot and such like. But then reading the report, I'll see that we'll spend 1.9 million on a multi-storey car park. So that was quite news to me, as that's quite a lot of money. And there are other city centre car parks available. So all new schools have travel plans. So I wondered what the travel plan was for the university. And you know, as with all new infrastructure, given this expenditure on parking, are we happy that it's really stringent enough for our responsibilities on climate action?
Thank you, Councillor Robinson. Yes, there is a green travel plan for the university, first building, and it is actually 36 spaces and would have sit quite happily on the arena site that we've acquired alongside the university, other than we went and got the money for a phase 2 and then dropped the phase 2 building pretty much on where the 36 car parking spaces were going to be. So that eradicated 36. The research building will house about 250 people. And that gave rise to, in fact, the PCC planners actually stipulating the need for an increase in car parking of about 195 spaces. So in fact, it's the PCC planners that are saying we need a car park, and we have indeed got a budget for it. There's 1.9 million of borrowing from PCC, 800k from the CPCA, 2.7 for a roughly 200 slot car parking facility.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Day.
Hi there, thank you for that really exciting report. I was really pleased as a Green Councillor that there's going to be a Faculty of Agriculture, Environment and Sustainability. So, and I was really interested in finding out how that may tie in with the current work and the future work we're going to be doing on the climate emergency in Peterborough. I'm aware that I'm meeting with you anyway on Monday to talk about this, but I just wondered if you could let the committee know how you maybe see that fitting together.
Yeah, absolutely. And actually, I should have responded a little bit on that agenda to Councillor Robinson, because she did sort of talk about, you know, what are you doing about the climate? So I'll hopefully pick that up now. The university faculty is developed around three sort of drivers. There is the student demand in terms of what students want to be taught, and that's important because that creates a market, and you've got to respond to your market. There's the employers in terms of what skills they need, and that's really important too, of course. And then there is building a niche for this university. What will it become known for? Dundee created a university about 7 years ago from nothing, and actually created a really good niche around gaming. And actually, it's grown incredibly quickly and got a really strong niche. We actually chose climate change and net zero technologies for the niche for this university and the university campus more broadly. So ARU are very keen on developing environmental management, net zero technologies, which includes, you know, chemistry and physics and all sorts of things, including innovation management. But also, as we build that research component, which will be, you know, nearly half the buildings on the site, that's also focused very much on attracting into Peterborough more companies, and our ambition is sort of like 50 or 100 companies that are all developing net zero technologies, so that Peterborough, and particularly the university and the campus, can actually become preeminent or at least highly competitive in net zero technologies, and we really want that campus to feel like it's a capital of net zero technologies and climate change action. Hope that's answered the question.
Yeah, that's excellent. Thank you. I've just got a little question back on that, because you touched upon the net zero carbon products and equipment that was going to be developed in phase 2. And I just wondered, because I'm already coming across things now, trying to implement things practically at a council level in terms of our carbon management action plans. And I just wondered, do you know at the moment what kind of, obviously you talked about the 3D batteries, but do you know what kind of products will be developed, or is that something that is on the horizon and we'll find out in sort of due course?
We will find out in due course, but we have got an ambition and a direction that we want to go in, and that's got a couple of components to it. Number one is we need a big hitter to partner with us. We can't just sort of make this up ourselves. We are hopefully partnering with TWI, that is a manufacturing technology organisation currently in South Camps. So the reason we've chosen them is because they've got an absolutely gorgeous portfolio of industrial members, from JLR to BAE to Shell to BP to all sorts of companies. And it'd be great if we could get Peterborough manufacturing companies into their supply chains doing net zero stuff and products, whether that's a product that goes on an airplane, it goes on a car, goes on a train, goes into a power station. So it's very much about manufacturing technologies and what I'd call subsystem technologies. So not components, but subsystems, like, bad example, but like a catalytic converter on a car. So it would be that sort of thing. We've got a good partner, and yeah, we think we can develop a really good set of products, and we've got a number of methods to link all of those with the companies in Peterborough, whether that's a company exploiting the technology we'll develop on site, or it's a company dropping into the supply chain for JLR that has developed a piece of technology. Either way, we want to get more, not just lots of technology on the campus, we want to get lots of Peterborough companies manufacturing and making net zero technology and products and systems.
Thank you, that's really exciting. Thanks for letting me know about that.
Thanks, Nicola. Peter.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you, John, for your inspiring report. May I just ask, how will the university reflect the considerable religious and social diversity of Peterborough and its rich history, both within its culture and in its courses?
Well, that is a question I wasn't expecting. It is fundamentally a very local university, and hence it will reflect certainly the culture and the ethnicity and the socio-economic structures of Peterborough and the Fence, because 90% of the students will come from here. We've done that because we've got a HE cold spot, so there's no point in creating a university that educates people from Leicester and then sends them back to Leicester. We've got to educate people who live here, who can get employed here. So it will represent our demographic. And there is culture and architecture in the faculty. So hopefully that will also have an opportunity to represent the incredibly rich architecture, for instance, and heritage of Peterborough. And I know ARU are very keen to embed in the vernacular of Peterborough.
Thank you. Flavio.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, John, for the presentation. It's very useful. My question is just around the student numbers and the projections going forward. And you show a steady increase of 1,000 students roughly per year, up to 2025, 26, and then an aspirational target of considerable number of 12,500. How close does one have to achieve that 12,500 for the viability, long-term viability of the university?
That's a brilliant question. It becomes commercially viable, and there's a sort of pretty established tipping point for most universities. Anything under sort of 3,000 or 4,000, you really struggle to make a viable business. Anything sort of 3,000, 4,000 up to 6,000, you're pretty safe, and anything above 6,500, you definitely are safe. So they're the sort of thresholds of viability, but that of course depends on your delivery model. And so again, that's another reason that in the early years we've got a very lean delivery model that doesn't have lots of accommodation, doesn't actually start off with a student union. That will come in the next phase. So we go for an incredibly lean model in the first 3 years. Part of the deal with the CPCA funding the building is that ARU get it rent free for the first 10 years, which also is a bit of a leg up. ARU have put aside 6 million into building the building as their share, but another 6 million of operational costs for the, as you will appreciate, for the early years where you will make a loss. In year 1, 2, and 3, you just won't make money because you just haven't built your students up enough. So that's an answer on the viability. In terms of the student numbers, achieving those numbers to 2,000 when we open in 2022 is pretty, we've got a high level of confidence, not least because ARU have got the best part of sort of 800 students already in Peterborough that they'll transfer in. And they are already marketing the university right now. Moving from 2,000 to 3,000 by 2024-25, again, relatively high levels of confidence. Then, like any business plan, the further you go out, the lower your confidence level is because the more your variables are. I'd say we've got medium level confidence of getting to that 6,500 level that we'll need to fill the 2 extra buildings, so the 3 buildings that are in this plan. Getting from 6,500 to 12, that is further away, lower levels of confidence, stuff that will happen between 2027 and 2032. So yes, it's an aspiration, and we call it an aspirational target, but how we actually get there, we don't know yet, because it's just too far away for any sensible commercial business person to try and predict or convince anyone they've got a real plan of.
Okay, many thanks.
Yeah, thank you. Councillor Dowson, please. Councillor Dowson, you need to switch your microphone on. That's it.
Yeah. Rather mundane question, and Councillor Cole possibly has sympathy for me on this one.
Councillor Dyson, we can't hear you very well.
You mentioned the Warina area, Bishop
Councillor Dyson, we can't hear you. Could you switch your camera off and just ask your question without vision? Oh. That's the end of my bright idea.
Okay. Can you now?
No, that's it. Yes.
That better?
Yes, much better.
Okay. Rather mundane question. Councillor Cole may have sympathy for this question. We have an issue of residents car parking at the moment with students at Ruskin College off Oundle Road. And it's been there for about 6 years, and the local residents are complained about students parking in the local streets. Now, we don't want this to affect the people.
No, you've gone again. Councillor Dowson, we can't hear you. No. Paulina, can I hand over to you? Oh, he's back again.
Yeah, maybe Councillor Cole might wish to have an input here.
Thank you, Councillor Dowson, and Chair. I'm very happy to cover that point. I believe I understand what the issue for our own ward, if you like, as we're in the same ward, is students parking in residential bays and not using the provided parking facilities I think it's on the basis of cost, and the issue that we don't want to see is that being repeated on the new site when and if that provision transfers across. And what guarantees are you able to give that that's not going to happen, and that residents of Eastward are going to find a similar issue with people parking in the streets and causing severe congestion?
Thank you, Councillors Delson and Coles. I think guarantees are not something I can give, being the project manager and the sponsor or the financier of the project. What we can do though is work with ARU once we're up and running in 2022 and look at their policies and their rules and regulations and their ability to influence the students in terms of what they do and they don't do.
I'm very grateful. I just think it's just something to bear in mind is that we've had quite significant discussions with the university, and the fact is they have to pay for the activities on the repair and upkeep of the car park. So there are certain levels of charges that have to be levied, and our concern is that if that continues on the new site, if the arrangements are the same, then we might find the local residents there becoming equally disenchanted with the idea of students being there locally.
Yeah. What I can say, just thinking there, is with PCC officers, we are looking at working up the business model for the car park that we're going to build there, and we can take into account the pricing level and the payback, so that we can attempt to get a pricing level that doesn't discourage the students from parking. But at the same time, thinking of Councillor Robinson there, we don't actually want to encourage the students to actually drive in. So we understand and we will address it.
Okay, thank you. I've got two more people out wishing to ask questions, and at that point, unless they're very quick questions, I'm going to stop it at that point, and then we can move on to the next agenda. So, Councillor Rush, please.
Thank you, Chair. When the university is up and running, will it be mainly a building-based learning, or will you be working with local industries and farmers so that students can go out in the field and get training that way?
Yeah, brilliant question, and it's a really important part of our model, not least because going back to Councillor Vitesse's question about that commercial viability, one of the ways we've got a lean model is that we actually train more students than we've got anywhere near the physical capacity to teach. And of course, the only way you can do that is you've got a lot of your students at any one point in time, not in the building. Some of those will be remote because of the trends that have now taken off. But I think it's something like 43% of the students will be in company. And by the way, we are talking to partners in the agriculture sector about on field as well as in company, and in particular we're talking to the East of England Agricultural Society about potentially being a sponsor for one of the future phases, and actually having a demonstration site on their new site, and having some of the students actually there learning. So yeah, students not on site but actually in company or in field is definitely something that is a big part of our model.
Okay, thank you. Al.
Thank you, Chair. Councillor Rush has kind of touched on part of what I wanted to just to kind of follow up on. Obviously, John, you'll be aware I'm a big supporter of it, and I think it's perfect timing post-COVID to have that blended model, and particularly with the courses aligning with what we need in the area. The thing that up until Councillor Rush's question I thought perhaps would be worthy of expanding was just not only the traditional course delivery, but how there's that fluidity and flex in terms of degree apprenticeships, and the timeline of how that will benefit businesses in Peterborough, because this is about providing education but also capacity for the local workforce.
Yeah, that's absolutely right. There are so many dimensions to the model that we've developed for this university. There's that element of off-site, in-company stuff, but there's also the blend of traditional learning with higher level degree learning. And again, one of the reasons that ARU did well in the procurement and the competition to be selected is because ARU are the largest provider of apprenticeship degrees in the country, and expanding further as we speak. So a large percentage are not only off site, but a large percent, I think something like 30% of all graduates will actually be apprenticeship degree students. And that's really important, because what we really want isn't to have lots of students graduating and then thinking, now where do I get a job and what sector do I go to? We want people to be graduating already with a job and with a great relationship with an employer, that they're now almost graduating and talking about progression at the company rather than getting a job. So apprenticeships are a massive part of what we want to do, and that is specifically because we want to link the students and the graduates with the businesses in the area, and the easiest way to do that is through apprenticeships.
Okay, thank you. I did say that was going to be the end of the questions, but Councillor Day, if it's very quick, approximately
Okay.
5 seconds, go ahead.
It won't be too long yet. So I did my degree through Peterborough Regional College through a Sheffield University extension programme, and I was able to become a teacher after training at Cambridge. So that having a university in Peterborough is just a great idea. And on page 18 on 4.2, you mentioned that there's a clear focus on underrepresented groups and those left behind who cannot or will not travel to existing providers. I just wondered if there was a strategy behind how you'd do this. Hope that's okay, Councillor Over. Thank you very much.
Seeing it's you.
Quick question, but I'll try and give a quick answer. Part of our strategy for going for local people is to get the jobs into the area. Once you say that, it's like, well, who would they be then? And what are the cohorts that you perhaps wouldn't want to go for? And this is sort of like a business school type concept are people who want to do a degree. And it might sound a bit weird, but we don't. It's not a great idea for us to market to people who have already decided they want to do a degree, because do you know what? They're going to go to De Montfort, they're going to go to Trent, they're going to go somewhere else. So part of the market that we're going to specifically go for are people who have either decided, I don't want to go for a degree, like unwilling customers, I've thought about it and I don't want to do it, or unconscious customers in terms of, I've never really thought about it. And that could be and would be actually a lot of people that are older. That at the moment, unfortunately, might be getting made redundant and thinking, do you know what? I might actually retrain and go up a level and go for a level 5 or level 6 qual and actually change career now. So it's those people that have either made a decision that they don't want to do a degree, or they can't because they've got a job and they can't afford just to pack up and do a degree because they need to pay the mortgage. That's where your apprenticeships come in, including older apprentices. So it's about going for those that local market, some of which aren't actually being chased after by the other universities.
Okay, thanks a lot. On to my next section now. If there are no further questions, I would like to note the recommendation in the report, which is for the committee to note the comments on the process and progress of the establishment of the university phase 1 teaching building, to note and comment on the process and progress of the establishment of the university phase 2 research building, note and comment on the outline plans for further expansion of the teaching and research campus on the embankment. Are the committee satisfied that we have done this? Please indicate by raising your virtual hand if you object. No? Good. I can't see any objectors, so the recommendation is agreed. Thank you very much for the paper, John. It's good to see you. I'm also very pleased about the new, is it vice principal his call that we've got for the university comes from an excellent university, but I may be a little bit biased about that at one point. Also for Councillor Holditch in attendance, and you may leave the meeting if you wish. So thank you very much.
Thank you, Chair. Goodbye.
Goodbye. Okay, thank you. We'll now move on to agenda item 6, report on the work of the Corporate Parenting Committee for 2019-2020, pages 25 to 32. To introduce the report, we have Councillor Ray Bisbee and Nicola Curley, sorry. I said that last time, didn't I? Sorry, Nicola Curley, Assistant Director of Children's Services. Would you like to introduce the report or go straight to questions?
Thank you. Nicola, is it okay if I just introduce this?
Of course.
So this is a report for 2019-2020. I suppose the big significant thing that happened in that particular year was the charity of Tact, who ran our council fostering services. And the committee wanted to make sure, and we did challenge on the fact that we needed a smooth transfer so that it didn't impact on the young people and the foster carers and also the staff that were involved in that. Through the year, we have 6 meetings. We have 3 that are for the children to come to, which are informal meetings. We have 3 that are formal meetings. And we break down to 3 kind of incidents, or no, sorry, 3 kind of themes through the year. That particular year was social care of children, safeguarding health. And we also have our corporate parenting champions, as you'll see in the report. And this gives the champions a chance to do some independent, in-depth study with the people out there and bring it back to the corporate parenting so we can see what may be coming up, what problems they have, and it keeps everybody updated with things. There was also a peer review which helped us to produce an action plan and ensure that we have consistency and improve things through the year. We have the Children in Care Council, or as they prefer to be called, Children in Charge Council, and the care leavers drop-in. Everything that we do is fully consulted on with those children in care and care leavers. And I think my last comment before we go on is the best comment and endorsement that the committee received and the impact that the committee had was from one of the young people who attended our informal meeting, when they said, we always thought that we were seen as a problem, that caused work and problems for everyone. Now, though, we can feel appreciated and we're listened to, and we know that we can have an impact and on change, and we now have value. For me, I think that is the best endorsement we could have got, and this is why we do it. All councillors are corporate or parents, corporate parents, but I think the committee has actually done a fantastic job when we get that endorsement from the children themselves. So thank you.
Thank you. All right, Nicola, are you going to continue?
I think we'd agreed that Councillor Bisbee would really do the introduction, but I think I would just want to underline we've actually got many members of the committee here this evening, so I'm looking at your, and we had a really productive informal meeting last night, and I have to say it was really lovely. It cheers me up enormously as an officer to get to spend the evening with some of our young people, because I don't get that option very often anymore, and it was a really positive and productive discussion with them yesterday. So I think the committee has obviously had a little bit of a hiatus because of COVID, and we did miss a couple of meetings, but actually has continued very successfully, I think, despite all of our difficulties over the last year, and has continued to show a real commitment and interest in our young people. And, you know, I'm very proud of Peterborough's Corporate Parenting Committee, and I think we do show the way actually for a number of others across the region, and we're still doing extremely good work. So I think we've tried to capture that in the report tonight, but obviously Ray and I are very happy to take any questions from non-Corporate Parenting Committee members.
Okay, thank you. If you have any questions, please can you raise your hand to indicate that you wish to speak? And the only person I've got at the moment is Al.
Thank you, Chair. I thought I'd better ask as one of the non. I noticed it's a really good report and very positive, so congratulations to everyone involved. I was interested in the role of the passport to independence, and I was just interested whether the last 9 months had created any additional challenges in terms of continuing that work and support.
So shall I pick that up? So I'll pick up the questions, and then Councillor Bisbee can come in if there's more he would like to add. It has been very challenging, I think, for our care leavers over the last year, and I think we've worked very hard to make sure that we've stayed in touch with our young people as far as we can. We've had a lot more virtual contact. You know, a lot of young people have felt much more isolated, and obviously, if you can imagine needing to be in lockdown in not necessarily the most fantastic accommodation, it's not the same as being at home with your parents or in a nice accommodation. It has been very challenging for some of them, but actually they felt very well supported by their personal advisors. And in fact, we looked at a case study last night actually, which looked at how a young person who has a baby had been very well supported by her PA to actually acquire move on into decent accommodation even during lockdown. So we have had challenges, but we do still have the offices open as well. And so we've seen young people when we've needed to, and we've had much more involvement with them virtually when we've needed to. So I think generally they have felt well supported.
That's really reassuring. Thank you, Nicola.
Thank you. Councillor Coles. Councillor Coles?
Yes, thank you very much. Item 474, it is about children who are accommodated outside the area. I'm just wondering what the impact has been over the last year or so, particularly with COVID and so on. How on earth we can, as corporate parents, ensure that we're looking after the educational needs, particularly when these children are outside of our area. We may not get to know about their particular issues, and particularly where we're talking about academy placements rather than within local authority run schools.
So I think in that respect, we've worked very closely with the virtual school. So members will be aware that we have a virtual school that supports all of our children in care. And we, at the beginning of the pandemic, we did have now have again, because we're now back in a lockdown, we have a vulnerable children's tracker for all of the children open to social care in Peterborough. And that has included all of our children in care. So we have actually gone through and evaluated whether these children needed face-to-face visits, did need people to go and see them, even if it was quite a long way away, or whether we could do some virtual visits with them and support them in that way. So where we have been really concerned about their situations and their placements, we have been going out and seeing them anyway. Where we've been less concerned, we've worked very closely with the carers that they're with, and the virtual school has worked with their schools in other areas to make sure that they've had access to the technology and the lessons and things like that. I don't think there's any getting away from the fact that our children start off more disadvantaged, so they are going to have found it difficult over the last year with all of this disruption in education. But I think actually we've done a really good job, and Dee the virtual school head has done a really good job in trying to make sure that that disadvantage has stayed as small as possible. And we're continuing to do that at the moment.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Rush.
I think Peter Cantley was before me. He's got his hand up.
Okay, Peter then.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, Councillor Rush. Just going to point 4.7.2, I'd like to ask, could you tell us more about the ongoing project to enhance the meaningfulness and function of personal education plans and how this is progressing?
So again, this was something that we were talking about last night, and what we're trying to do. So I think people know that a personal education plan is designed for a child in school, and looks at their particular needs when they're a child in care and sets them targets and moves them forward, and is reviewed 3 times a year. One of the ways to make them more purposeful is partly to make sure that the young person has as much input and involvement as possible, and we've been working on that with them about how we make it a more meaningful document and a more meaningful experience for them as individuals. The other element that we've been working very hard to do is to bring the health element of our work with children in care into the PEPs as well. So we do something called an SDQ, which is Strengths and Difficulties Questionnaire, with our children in care, looking at their emotional health and well-being. And there's a scoring and potentially an action plan coming out of that. And in an ideal world, all of that links together into the PEP and comes together so that you get a cohesive plan that supports that child going forward. So we're working on that. That's sort of the mecca that we would want to get to. So we're working on that, but that's the piece of work that's underway, and we've got some of our young people working on it with us through the Children in Care Council to develop that further.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Rush.
Thank you, Chair. Could you tell me what type of accommodation the children are in, and has the COVID caused any problems with their accommodation?
So our children in care are either in foster homes, so either our own in-house foster carers, or we do have some children with IFA carers, so private agency placements, or they're in residential units, residential homes, which tend to be further away out of area. And then we do have some 16 to 18-year-olds who live in more semi-independent placements. So it has depended really on what kind of placement you're in terms of some of the impact of COVID. What I would say is that our providers and certainly our in-house foster carers have actually been really, really fantastic to date. So they have worked very hard with us to maintain children in their placements, to, if they have had problems with staff being ill, catching COVID or needing to self-isolate, they've worked with us and our commissioning colleagues to make sure that children have been able to stay in their placements, or we've made short-term arrangements to continue those. Our foster carers have continued to support supervised contact, things like that. So generally, our children have been very well supported around that area. It has, like I said earlier, been a bit harder for our care leavers, who are sometimes in more, not the best accommodation. And we've attempted to support them with that. And certainly when they're housed through our housing colleagues, we've worked very closely with them to try and offer them additional support. So I think generally placements are now becoming more challenging. I suspect that we'll talk about that in Lou's report. Finding placements is more challenging. As time goes on, it gets increasingly difficult. And there is a cost implication. Obviously, the scarcer something becomes, the more expensive it tends to become. But generally speaking, our children who are in care have been well supported within their placements, and our in-house foster carers have been fantastic actually, and have really stepped up and done their best to support kids even when they haven't been well themselves sometimes.
Okay. Lovely, thank you. There are no more hands up as far as I can see, so I think the question is finished. If there are no further questions, I'd like to note the recommendation in the report, which is for the committee to note the work of the Corporate Parenting Committee over the last 12 months. Is the committee satisfied that we have done this? Please indicate by raising your virtual hand if you object. I can't see any objections, so the recommendation is agreed. So thanks a lot, Nicola, and also tell me who it is. Who's the councillor?
Ray Bisley.
Ray, of course, that's right. Yes, and he's right next door to Nicola on my screen. So thanks both of you.
Thank you very much for your invitation.
Okay, on to agenda item 7. We'll go on now to the Service Director report, Children and Safeguarding, including update on the impact of COVID-19, pages 33 to 44 of the agenda. I'd like to welcome Lou Williams, Service Director, Children and Safeguarding, to present this report.
Thank you very much. So as you'll have gathered, as you've read the report, it was written during the halcyon days of Tier 4 in Peterborough as opposed to lockdown 3. But in fact, it was written actually right just before Christmas, because that's the kind of reporting timeframes for this committee. In fact, the content about where the pressures are in terms of some increasing signs of complexity of need within children's services and the children that refer to us haven't changed very much. And in terms of our approach, while we're now in lockdown as opposed to Tier 4, we have reviewed again, as we did in the first lockdown, who needs to be in work, can we work more remotely, and so on. But we are still visiting children in the community, particularly children who are open to us as children in need or children subject to child protection plans. We are still seeing children who are in care placements if we think that we need to see them in order to keep those placements secure. So, much of what's in the report in those sections has remained the case. It hasn't changed particularly. What I do want to draw your attention to, though, because it was part of the reason for bringing this report to you as well, is the really positive information about family safeguarding. And I do really want to hope members have read that section, because you'll remember that, we were a pilot authority in Peterborough some years back for family safeguarding. We've been very clear that it has a tremendous impact in terms of supporting and helping parents to make the changes they need to make in order to safely continue to care for their children. We've been very clear about that. Our staff really enjoy working to the model. It's been very positive. The DFE gave us the setup money in order to develop the model. What's really good is that an evaluation of the 4 authorities that piloted it after Hertfordshire initially developed it, so that was Peterborough, Bracknell Forest, Luton, and I've forgotten the other one, West Berkshire, that those 4 authorities were evaluated. And you can see I've put a very quick summary in the report, but I've also provided a link to that evaluation. Really positive, really good, and really good news for us as a service. So happy to take any questions.
Okay. Here they come. Right, Councillor Coles. Yes, Councillor Coles, please.
Thank you, Chair. And Lou, thank you very much for your report. It's, as always, very good, very interesting reading. The one question I have for you really is about your level of confidence in questions of safeguarding, particularly when a lot of referrals come from schools and they've got their own issues in maintaining contact with their students throughout this period. What level of confidence do you have that you have a grip on the current level of concern around children? And do we need to do anything additional, bearing in mind that there may be some difficulties about school referrals, particularly during lockdown?
Yeah, absolutely. There's no question at all that children are less visible when they're not in school. That's a given, and we can't really do anything about that. That's just an absolute given. What has been interesting, though, is that referrals, while they have reduced during periods when children are not in school, they haven't dried up completely. We do get referrals from other sources. And, you know, we've worked really hard with partners, with schools as well, actually, but also with other partners and through the Safeguarding Children Partnership to put a lot of information out about, you know, what to do if you're concerned about a child, so that there are other mechanisms and routes in. And for example, actually schools this time round, as well as last time, have been amazing in maintaining contact with pupils that they're concerned about. So they know the children that they're worried about, and they've gone above and beyond to kind of maintain contact. But, you know, the tail end of COVID is going to be a long one for children's services. There's without question, there will be and already are signs of increased complexity of need of children who perhaps lived in difficult situations for longer than they might otherwise have done. And that's as a result of the first lockdown. So that can only be compounded this time. But, you know, we do everything we can to make sure that children are visible, but they're not as visible when they're not in school.
Thank you very much. If I could just ask a brief additional question. Is there anything that you can do to support schools as they're operating virtually with so many of their students, to make sure that should there be any issues that they're able to identify them and refer them on?
So they're very aware of the report, you know, the referral processes. We have the MASH, which is operating as normal, so the multi-agency safeguarding hub, which has education staff within it. There are mechanisms in place. And we actually, I mean, I think one of the things that has been really positive about the COVID situation and lockdown is that children's services and children's social care and education colleagues have really worked incredibly well together to make sure that we are doing everything we can to identify any children that might be falling through gaps.
I'm grateful, thank you.
Okay, thank you. And where are we here? Councillor Robinson, please.
Thank you. Good evening, Lou. And I think before I begin, I remember in last Scrutiny Committee, Jonathan Lewis got lots of thank yous. So I think everyone would join me in extending a big thank you to you and your team.
And Nicola, can I just say Nicola as well? She's the operational AD and you know, has held it all together as well.
Yes, and Nicola's team as well, because you're continuing to have to work under the strain of the pandemic, and you must really have your fingers crossed more than the rest of us. So my question is around the family safeguarding project report. I think the outcomes in that have sounded fantastic. It seems like a really big success. So reading the evaluation report that you signposted us to within it, I noticed that one of the recommendations for that was local authorities to look at the potential of kind of long-term cohort tracking, so we can kind of learn long-term how the people who've participated first, sort of outcomes and the kind of information we get from that. And then secondly, in that evaluation report, it talks about that all the local authorities had difficulty recruiting the adult-facing workers, but that Peterborough had a challenge that persisted longer with the difficulty finding mental health specialists. So I just wondered how that had panned out since.
Yes, so it was very difficult initially. So there was, you know, some initial difficulties around those particular roles. And I think some of that was about it being quite difficult to explain what it was, because nobody had done it before. You know, it was kind of new model of practice. And it took some time for us to be able to work with colleagues in CPFT to really kind of articulate what the role would be and how positive it would be. So I'm not going to pretend that it's all fine. What we have is we you know, we all have a continuing, as we do all of the time in all of the roles that we have, you know, a small turnover of staff, but the basic position has got much better actually. And the other area where we had some initial challenges, both in Cambridgeshire and Peterborough, was in relation to domestic abuse perpetrator workers. And some of that was around, particularly more recently, has been around the move from bench, the public, you know, those public interest companies back into the probation service. So there have been some challenges, but again, I have to say that the National Probation Service have been really, really supportive in making sure that we can recruit and providing staff, even though they're not technically within the contract to deliver the service. So we've got, you know, the local partners are really signed up to the approach. They do everything that they can to support effective recruitment and support of staff.
Okay, thank you. Flavio, please.
Thank you, Chair, and good evening, Lou. And my question is around the Think Communities and Capacity Building section 4.54. Talks about the increasing likelihood of the number of families needing support and the importance to think slightly more out of the box in terms of what might be available more in the future. Could you elaborate on some of the thinking around that, please?
Yes, so I mean, some of this has been driven, of course, by our experience within the Peterborough hub and more generally across the county council as well, actually, in the district council hubs, and just the actual volume of support and willingness to try and support those in communities which are less fortunate that just emerged and erupted through the COVID pandemic, actually. And so it's very much about thinking about different ways that we can look at supporting whole communities to kind of meet some of the challenges that they might be experiencing, rather than a more traditional way of working individually with individual families. So what we would try and do is work perhaps with schools or with voluntary sector organisations to look very much at smaller communities and challenges that might be being faced, and offering support in that way. So during the Christmas holidays, we used that process to roll out support that the government funded to help vulnerable pupils around meals and having enough to eat. One of the things that approach meant, though, was that we were able to provide some other forms of support, access to debt counselling, debt support, and things like that, by funneling all of that support through that network.
Great. Okay, thank you.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Skipstead, please.
Thank you, Chair. Hi, Lou. I have a question just around, you mentioned, I think it's 4.16, about the increasing complexity of the cases being referred. I just wondered what you thought the reason for that was. Was it just the pandemic, or is it a factor of population growth, or what do you think is the cause of that? I have another question as well. Do you want me to do them separately, or?
You can hit me with both, and you might have time if I go off piste a bit.
Yeah, the other one was just around resources, really. Always the question. Sorry, I'm just trying to. It was 4.27. You mentioned that the changes being managed are being managed within the current resources for the present, but it's likely that the pressures are going to mean an increase. How do you see that demand being met? Do you think it can be met? And what can we do to make sure that happens?
So I think the question about complexity is quite multifaceted, really. I think what we're seeing is, for example, amongst young people, I think there has been a cumulative effect of lockdown, of social isolation, of not being in school, that has affected some young people who perhaps have slightly less resilience to cope with things, has affected them, and that we're seeing an increase in emotional and mental health issues, which is then feeding through into how parents feel able to support their children, which is then feeding through into requests for help and support from services more generally. So I think you've got that sort of impact that's happening. I think you have similarly, for younger children, many of whom have been out of school for a lot of time now, that's a real disruption to their normal life. Again, school does much more than just educational activities. Of course, it's socialization, it's development, and all the rest of it, and it's the practical support to parents in the parenting role. And many families have been looking after children 24/7 for much of the last 10 months, 11 months. And if you're in accommodation which is perhaps slightly crowded, or certainly not as spacious as some, that's going to increase pressures within the household. And I also think, as I said in my answer to Councillor Coles, there are some children because they haven't been as visible, who have been exposed to more difficult situations for longer, and they're coming to us with more complex difficulties as well. So I think it's a whole range challenge, if I'm honest. I think in relation to the question about resources, at the very beginning of the pandemic, we put in some markers, some bids to MCHLG about what we thought might emerge in terms of resource pressures, and we are revisiting those at the moment. So we have drawn down some additional resource to support early help across the city. We're now looking at whether we do need some additional resource within the more specialist children's social care. We think we may well do, and I've prepared to bid for resources to add another 6 or so social workers, which would enable us to support 90 to 100 more children at any one time. So we will take those steps if we need to do so. We're managing at the moment, but it's a question of, if this continues and we see the demand not dissipating, we'll probably need to put those bids in.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Al, please.
Thank you, Chair. Lou, you've just alluded to the question I was going to ask you, and thank you for all your efforts, you and your team. I was looking at the report on 4.17 about single assessments, and obviously there's an inevitable capacity that comes along. I was just wanted to kind of drill down a little bit in terms of how were we doing in terms of timeliness of those and caseworker load, and given there's inevitable pressures on all of the systems across the local authority, have you got some plans to mitigate? It sounds like you've already got some thoughts around that area.
So timeliness of single assessments actually is held up remarkably well for both authorities. I was just quickly seeing if I could see a screen that had the percentage, but as you were asking a question, but I don't have that right now, but they have held up remarkably well. What we've also been very clear about, and people who've been on this committee for a long time will know that we've been trying to address the fact that we in both authorities actually, but in Peterborough particularly, we've tended to do more assessments than perhaps we need to do. So we've had significant or relatively significant numbers of assessments concluded with no further action or a step down to early help. So we have been working on that as well. And that's helped to manage the actual amount of assessments within the assessment team. One of the things that we hadn't foreseen, though, and one of the impacts of the lockdown is that for pregnant women, third trimester, you need to work from home. And we have a couple of pregnant women in the assessment team, and it's quite a small team, and they're in the third trimester. So we're having to think about some additional resource, actually, just very practically, to manage some of the challenges like that. But actually, our timeliness has been pretty good. I can give you I can add a figure to the minutes if helpful, but I don't have it on me right now, I'm afraid.
Thanks, Lou.
Thank you. Councillor Day, please.
Hi, thanks, Lou, for all the work you're doing, and obviously your team, of course. I've got a couple of questions. You talk about visiting children face to face, and obviously I'm aware that this report was written in Tier 4, so things have changed then since lockdown. I just wondered if there are any obstacles still to meeting these families face to face. And then you mentioned in 4.13 the challenge that you have had in the pandemic, and you talk about the extra pressures and new pressures, and you talk about a 220,000 increase in directly provided support to families that you've pressed for. I just wondered if there was an update on this funding, whether you've been able to secure that to help the service deliver its service. Thank you.
Okay, so in terms of visits, as we did in the original lockdown, we, excuse me, our managers have reviewed every single child that's open to the service, whether that's at an early help level or child in need or children subject to child protection plans, and we've assessed those and basically RAG rated those. So the ones that we're most concerned about, we absolutely continue to do face-to-face visiting for those. For those that are perhaps, moving along okay, and there isn't a particular reason to visit face-to-face, we've moved to more of a mixed virtual visiting, or perhaps some virtual visiting, some direct visiting. Sorry, you'll have to remind me that the question about resource, sorry.
Yes, sorry. You talking on, I think in 4.13, yes, you talk about asking for a £220,000 increase in directly provided support to families in the coming months. I just wondered if there was an update on this funding and whether you managed to receive that or what the progress is on that.
Yes, we've identified that funding, and that is available. So we're using that to support those families.
Okay, thank you. I've got two more questioners on here. No, I've got three now. We'll have these three questions and then call an end to the report. So the next person on my list is Councillor Ayres.
Thank you, Chair. I really wanted to make some comments. I don't mind if you wait till the end to let me make the comments, because they're not questions really for Lou or for Nicola. But I wanted in particular to make sure everybody appreciates just how important this family safeguarding model is and how much it has saved our local authority, because it has unquestionably, I've seen over the past couple of 2 to 3 years, kept down the children who actually have to come into care. And of course, that is very important for the local authority, not just from a financial point of view, but from the child's point of view and the whole family, because the child then remains with the family. It has been most successful. And I was going to say, I know you've talked a little bit about money and helping on the budgets and asking about that, the councillors on this call. And if ever you see any request for money in that respect, please remember just how important this family safeguarding is and how well it's operated within Peterborough and is moving now into Cambridgeshire. And just secondly, the most important thing I've seen, I think, since we've had the lockdowns, etc., is just how much emphasis is put upon seeing the children face to face. Many local authorities, as I understand it from having attended network meetings with other local authority people, not every local authority has been doing that, but ours has. And I really do want to congratulate Nicola and her team, and Lou, of course, because of that, because it means, I'm sure, so much to the foster carers as well, if they're seen face to face or even virtually, because they always ring them up as well. If they don't see the children face to face, there's a lot of telephoning and making sure everybody is okay. So they really do need congratulating, and that's what I would like to do, and on everybody's behalf, because I know that all of the councillors here will be aware of just how much work has been going on. So thank you very much.
Thank you. Councillor Robinson, please.
Thank you. As there was a few minutes left, I thought I'd sneak another question in. So my question's around 4.25, where it says the increase in numbers is partly about it being more difficult to progress child protection plans, and this is tending to mean children are remaining on them longer. So as face-to-face visits and virtual things are still going on, could you just give us a little background as to why it's been harder to progress CP plans? And do you think it won't improve until sort of lockdown lifts? Is there much light at the end of the tunnel?
Yeah, of course. So I think, as I say, we've learned a great deal about virtual visiting, virtual support, and for some families it's brilliant. And we'll continue to use it actually, and it enables us to, particularly in the early help world and in parenting support programs and stuff, we can reach many more people with the same resource, and it works very well. And some people prefer it because it enables you to perhaps ask questions about how to parent children without really making yourself so visible and all the rest of it. So there's all sorts of things that actually are very good. But in terms of the family safeguarding approach, we are talking about parents who, generally speaking, have serious difficulties around substance or alcohol misuse, really problematic substance or alcohol misuse, some ingrained and quite serious issues around domestic abuse. We have got, so if you take the example of substance misuse, actually the proportion of people who complete successfully substance misuse programs is really good, actually, and better in family safeguarding than it is in the same services general population. And that's because actually families at this point in time are very often very motivated to change because they want to look after their children well. So, you know, they're motivated to join. But the most successful substance misuse programs involve face-to-face group work, and that's quite difficult, obviously, in a situation where groups are very difficult to hold because of social distancing rules and all the rest of it. And I think what we found in the first lockdown was that where we'd already established relationships, where groups had already been up and running, switching to Zoom still had had less of an impact, but it's been more difficult where you've had to start from that position, and more difficult to kind of, you know, support parents to make the changes they need to make. So I think there will be a continuing impact until we can move out of this lockdown, and as soon as we can, then we'll be back to kind of business as normal.
Thank you. Thank you. Peter?
Thank you, Chair. Also, can I say many congratulations to Lou and to Nicola and the whole team for the tremendous work they've done in very challenging circumstances. I was very struck by the comment in 4.78. It's clear that demand and complexity will both increase. And so I wanted to ask, in what ways do you envisage demand and complexity will increase in the coming months? And what are the most critical factors in addressing this increasing demand and complexity effectively?
So as I say, I think it is just that we will see, you know, a continuing impact of school not being available for some families, and also actually just in terms of the economic impact as well. I think we will see more families that are struggling to maintain housing over their heads, and that can only increase, you know, pressures on families themselves. But if we take the example, I mean, I think one group of people that I have been concerned about all the way through really has been your 13, 14, 15-year-olds who were back in March disengaging from school, or only just really engaged with school, that were struggling to remain in school. And then schools, you know, closed for most pupils. They remained open, of course, but, you know, things went online. And I think that there are a group of 14, 15, 16-year-olds who would have disengaged at that point in time, and whose needs can only really become more challenging as a result. There are, you know, all sorts of vulnerabilities that they may be at risk from in terms of offending behaviour, criminal exploitation, and so on and so on. And whilst we might be talking about, in absolute terms, still relatively small numbers, young people who do get into serious difficulties like that, you know, that their support needs are extensive. If they do need to come into the care system, their care placements are expensive as a result. So they can have quite a big impact, even if we're talking about small numbers. I think for children more generally, and you know, there's the papers have been talking about this today. You know, the achievement gap will broaden again in terms of, you know, the impact of the lockdown. By and large, children who live in less well privileged homes will, I think, suffer more in terms of educational attainment and progress than children who live in more affluent homes, and the pressures on parents will probably be less for children in affluent homes than they are in those homes which are struggling more financially. So I think there's a whole raft of things that are likely to come to emerge over the coming months, essentially.
Okay, thank you. So if there are no further questions, I'd like to note the recommendation in the report, which is for the committee to, 1, note the evidence of emerging impact arising from the COVID-19 pandemic and its associated economic and other implications. 2, note the preparedness of children's services to continue to meet need. 3, note the potential resource implications of continued increased demand and complexity of need. And 4, welcome the findings of the independent evaluation of family safeguarding as practiced in Peterborough, including evidence of improved outcomes for vulnerable children and lower costs. Are the committee satisfied that we have done this? Please indicate by raising your virtual hand if you are Oh. Oh, I've gone for a minute then. I'll go back to item 4. Sorry, a recommendation 4. Welcome the findings of the independent evaluation of family safeguarding as practiced in Peterborough, including evidence of improved outcomes for vulnerable children and lower costs. Are the committee satisfied that we've done this? Please indicate by raising your virtual hand if you object. Okay. I can't say that I can see any objections, so I move on to thank Lou and all the officers involved and the whole team for presenting and having input into this report. Excellent. And if you wish to leave, please do so with our thanks. Okay, agenda item 8, forward plan of executive decisions, pages 1 to 53. Please note that there is a more recent version of the forward plan, which was published on Friday, the 15th of January, 2021, and was emailed to committee members on Monday. And this is the version that will be referred to for this meeting. Please refer to pages 1 to 53 of that document. Are there any items on the forward plan that the committee would wish to receive further information on? Chairman to advise the committee that they can only request information on items relating to this committee. No. Yeah. Okay, thanks, Paulina. Can you make a note that there have been no requests? Agenda item 9 will we'll now move on to the work programme 2020 to 2021, pages 95 to 100, and over to you, Paulina.
Thank you, Chair. This is a standing item at the end of each meeting to reflect on the work programme for the forthcoming meeting, which is in March, in fact, the last meeting of this municipal year, and to ask you if there are any further suggestions of items from today's meeting that you might wish to add for consideration at the group reps meeting, which will be next week, for any further agenda items which you may wish to have at the March meeting. Thank you.
Paulina, I'd like to add almost as a standing item for the group rep meeting. It's the university. We've got about a year before doors open, and I think we need to be kept informed in detail. Maybe not every meeting, but probably. But let's hear what the others have got to say at the group meeting.
Noted, Chair.
Right. Looks like we're okay, Paulina.
Councillor Ayres has got her hand
Oh,
up,
yes.
Chair.
Yep.
Oh, sorry. You can hear me now. Yes, yeah. I was going to ask, please, if you would, because that's the first time that the Scrutiny Committee has had the opportunity to scrutinise about the university, and I did think that it was very important, and you very kindly, with Paulina's assistance, got it into this year's Scrutiny Committee. And I think, however regularly you want to hear it, I mean, we should probably not necessarily get John T. Hill every time, but certainly probably once a year we might. But anyway, if you can talk about that, I should be very grateful, because I think it's very important to scrutinise it as it goes along, and that will be when it's open. Obviously, it will. If somebody's needs to come along, we need to know what's going on, or you need to have the opportunity to question. Definitely.
Yes, be good to have one of our meetings in the boardroom of the university when it's all open and running. We could try that. Councillor Coles.
Thank you, Jerry. I was just thinking, since the work of the Scrutiny Committee for the Combined Authority, what falls to me is that to do with university and schools. What I've seen is probably 3 months to 6 months is probably sufficient at the moment while the university is being built and that process is going on. So I wouldn't suggest we focus too much on it at the moment, because there's very little in terms of activity that you can really comment on, other than there's been a phase of building and it's now complete. I think maybe after 2023 that might be different. But if it comes to wanting a feedback, I'm always very happy to share the information that I glean from attending the Skills Committee and the Oversight and Scrutiny Committee.
Okay, thank you. Done, Paulina?
Would you mind if I just make one further point, Chair?
Go on, Councillor Ayres. Yeah.
Thank you. On the 4th of March, I know that we have got Pat Carrington from the City College is going to be doing a report for everybody, which again, I did ask if they could, and you put it into the March meeting, so thank you very much. Because I met with her and with the new person who is running the skills section for the combined authority, a gentleman called Parminder Singh, only yesterday, and Pat Carrington did think that it might be sensible, if you agree to it, or if everybody agrees to it, if Parminder Singh comes along with her to help do that report, because I do think that I'd like a little bit more visibility of the combined authority to this scrutiny committee, and he can, you know, and so he was quite happy, I hope, to come along. I mean, if I can let you know, because he was going off to have a talk about it. But if I can let you know, Paulina, for when you meet with when is it your meeting, everybody, to talk?
It'll be sometime next week, Councillor.
Okay, well, I'll try and find out before then and let you know. But anyway, it's just a thought that I had at the time.
Yeah, okay. Lovely. Yeah,
okay, thank you.
Yeah, I'd also welcome that, because when I'm on combined authority meetings, Cambridge, Fenland, and all the other district councils always seem to have a lot to say about a university in Peterborough, and not always very supportive. So it'd be better that if we then slowly adopt some of the scrutiny functions in the case of the university. Yeah, because I'm fed up of some of these places saying, why does Peterborough need a university? They've got one in Leicester.
Yes, I'm with you completely, Chair.
Okay. Right, Paulina, we're finished, are we?
Yes, there are no further hands up, so that's it. Thank you.
That's good. Right. So in record time, the committee is to note the dates of the next meeting. I'm fairly sure that the joint scrutiny of the budget won't be finishing at 8:30. But anyway, I will see you all on the 4th of March, God willing. So thank you.